Okay, good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Welcome. So today we have another one of those special sessions that I know that have always been very helpful for parents. We always get really good feedback for this session and this event. Is where we bring in adult children of parental alienation to share with you their stories. This is your chance to hear what happened behind the closed doors, because really what your children are going through, there's no way for you to truly know what's going on. I know you have a sense, you can guess certain things, but really, and then also how is your children feeling, what is their experience. So this is your chance to ask your question while you are there. I for some reason, again, very often I have problems seeing comments right now, but please do let me know if you can hear me. I hope that usually it takes me a few minutes for the comment to show up, but let me know you can hear me okay. But today I have with me these beautiful, amazing ladies. There's Lisa, Monica, and Emily, and they all are the adult children of parental alienation. I'm so grateful for them to be here because it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable and share their stories, and your stories are going to be so helpful for the parents out there and also for the other adult children out there. So thank you so much for being here. So to start out, I'm curious, who were you, like which parent were you alienated from? Let's start with Lisa.
My mom.
You were alienated from your mom. Okay, what about you,
Mhm.
Monica?
My dad.
Okay, and Emily?
My dad.
Okay, thank you. So this is a good mix. So, we talk about this a lot where we say, unfortunately, parental alienation does not discriminate. It will, it doesn't matter if you are a mom or dad, it can happen to both side, there is no gender thing here, unfortunately. So how old were you guys? Let's just take turn again. I mean, like Lisa, how old were you when this started?
My parents divorced when I was 4, so I believe every parent kind of helped alienate, but it really took effect when I was 8. When I
Oh,
moved in with, yeah, I was 8.
okay,
You know,
but it started before eight, though, right?
yes, because I had some pretty strong attachment issues with my dad,
Yeah.
and looking back, I can see how it started then, but it really it turned on into full blown high alienation from like 8 all the way up until I figured it out.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And then, Monica, how old were you when this started?
Actually, about the same age as Lisa, between that 8 and 10 range, was when my parents divorced. And I always kind of knew something was going on, something was changing before they announced the divorce. And, lived with my mom and didn't see my dad much. It just, snap of a finger like that. It changes overnight.
Wow,
It's, it's
Mhm.
really shocking.
wow. What about you, Emily?
There was a high conflict scenario. There were a lot of accusations and criminal proceedings. I was 4.
Oh my
So,
God.
but I have multiple children in our family. So I was one of the youngest. Some of my other siblings have different perspectives and memories. So I was pretty young. I don't remember a lot of ever living with my dad. I have some really wonderful memories, but very, very little.
Oh wow. I'm sorry. Please let me just double check to make sure that this is streaming, because for some reason today my computer just does not show at all, and I don't want us to just keep going without. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything, so I just want to make sure that this is working. Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know why. I used to have no problem, but now um it's something changed in Facebook because it doesn't show me. See.
Are you? Do you want me to check your? Would it be on your Facebook or
Yeah,
your?
yeah. Okay, no, we definitely live. I see comments
Oh,
on my phone.
okay.
I see
I know, I was gonna check too.
Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, see, Candice said that she can hear us. Pavneet, say hi, Petra. Hi, Pavneet. I never seen your name before. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I have to use my phone because for some reason on the computer it doesn't show. Gina, yes, hi, thank you. Derek, hi, thank you. Candice said I can look back now and the dad was grooming before the divorce, and good to hear you realize that afterwards. Okay, thank you so much for everyone, and please, I hope that my comment's gonna show up, so please do post your comment and questions because we'll try to pick your question and comments soon. If not, I will try to look on the on my phone. But okay, so great. So let's go into what happened. You know, the kind of behaviors or things that causes. So Lisa started saying that you had sort of a serious attachment with your dad. Can you talk more about that? Like what was going on?
Yeah. For some reason, and it was kind of in the script. So the script that was written, about me, but I had I was very close with my dad. I had when my dad would leave, I would hold on to his like legs or arms. I'd cry. Um, my dad was very close with me. So he was always calling like 3 times a day, like morning and then, when I got home from school. So when I wouldn't get these phone, if he was like 5 minutes late, I would start, like, where's my dad? Like, what's going on? So I can remember feeling that I didn't know at the time what it was, but I can remember feeling what I now know is like worry, anxiety, like it just happens overnight. Like, where's my dad? Where is he? So of course, when I would see him, I wouldn't want to let him go. And back then they didn't train parents. Well, they would sit down and explain, your dad's, both your parents love you and we're here. None of that happened. So that just puts more, dirt and mud in our brain, like what's happening to us. So yeah, it was a very, very close with my dad.
Wow.
And my mom. Yeah.
So you said that you mentioned the word script. Is this your memories or is this something that you saw later somewhere and then you like you're sharing with us? This is your actual memories or is that something that you read somewhere?
They're my actual memories, but they were also used as a way to alienate me. So my stepmom took a bit of the truth and she exaggerated it. So, which is what alienators do. So had I not read the script had I not remembered where that script was, which is straight from an alienator, after raising my son, there's no way I would have been able to put it all together, start healing, understand it all. There's a lot, but I never stopped trying to figure it out because I was always angry.
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused. You mentioned the word script. What do you mean by there's a script about you? Can you explain?
Okay, so you know how most of us get alienated through words? I didn't just get alienated through words. I was actually, my stepmom wrote like a script, a journal. And not only did she read it, I read it and it erased and it became the new foundation. So she literally wrote my mom out of my life, and how she wrote and what she said, that's that's going to come out later when the book comes out. But it's very it is probably one of the most, other doctors have read it. It's probably one of the most, the CDC says it's one of the most hateful things that could happen, because when we read something, we don't just read it, we actually visualize it. And when you're that young, our brains are still developing. So what we say and how we say and who we have around our kids is so important. So,
okay, so yeah. Your stepmom wrote something about your mother and give it to you to read. Is this what I understand?
She recreated my entire life from the time my mother was pregnant, and then how she fantasized it would turn out.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, so, I understand. All right, so she wrote a story and gave it to you, and you were 4 to 8 years old.
I lived with my stepmom and my dad from the time I was like 7.5 till I was 13. And in between, I'd say 8 and 12 is when she wrote, and when she wrote the script and when I read it. And that's when everything kind of stuck to my brain.
Yeah. All right. So she wrote this story about your mother and you, and rewrite your whole history.
My whole entire, yes, used family members, everything that an alienator does, even throw stuff in there about even court stuff. Yes, very much. Yeah.
Okay, that is so crazy. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. That is so crazy. We'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. So Monica, what about you? What was the kind of things that were done?
So I remember the main thing I remember is like having to choose, right? Like having to choose a favorite, kind of like if you have children, or, you know, we have our children, maybe there's that child that you just enjoy a little more. So I remember that feeling of having to choose. And there were some of the things that were done. I didn't know back then, but found out more as I got older. And some things even just like within the last year, like that recent, that I found out. And so in the court documents, it was stated that my mom could have decision making for visitation. And it was confusing. I remember being very, very confused, because they would say one thing but do another. And it just, you can't build a foundation on that. You don't know, you're like this ship constantly rocking, you know, on the ocean. You have no foundation. I didn't know who to believe. I didn't know who to trust. There's also another aspect of this. I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And one of the things that happened in my parents' marriage was cheating. There was a cheating spouse. And so this was also, I mean, I'll just say it, it was shaming on the cheating spouse, right? Which should never happen, because we have no idea what goes on behind closed doors. We are human beings and imperfect, and there's two sides to every story. So I would see less and less of my dad. And yet I wasn't really being raised by my mother. It's almost like she would have rather have been at work than at home.
So can we go back a little bit? So you said, you started out saying you remember the feeling of having to choose. Could you elaborate a little bit more, as in, like, did someone say anything that you could remember, or was there, you know, certain behavior that you could remember that made you feel like you had to choose?
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So what would happen? It's so hard to go back to that place because we block it out. I think it kind of goes back to that, like saying one thing and doing another. I could tell because I'm a very emotionally connected person. I was my mother's confidant, and I shouldn't have been, but I just had that natural ability, and she had no one else to talk to at home. And so it was in her body language, right? Her body language, her facial expression. I'm trying to remember. think of specifics. I know I'm being kind of vague. I could just tell from her energy and her body language that she hated my dad.
Yeah, no, it's not hard for children to sense this. And then
Yeah.
you mentioned something important there, which is alienators very often will use the children as an emotional dumping ground, and sort of like making the children responsible for their, emotional well-being. So even though you're the
Yes.
child, you're certainly playing the adult, the parent role almost for that parent. And
Oh, thank you. Yeah. That parent, I was the parent to my parents. And you brought up a really good point in that that carried on into adulthood, to the point that when my dad remarried someone that actually was a good match for him, I couldn't be happy for him because I was loyal to my mother. I had to be loyal to my mother. She didn't have anyone else. And so, but then that trickles into extended family. And then they judge you for not being accepting towards your parents, the remarriage. It's like this crazy domino effect. And I don't have relationship with any of them
so you lost
right now.
you lost all that side of the family. And
I had to choose. Yeah, I had to make some hard choices because they weren't willing to accept that there was another side to this story,
yeah,
and that
so
I wasn't
you
really choosing my dad.
right. And that's crazy thing is that you had to choose. You feel like if you somehow accept your dad, then your mother would be hurt, and you feel responsible for her
Right.
feeling and her
Absolutely.
well-being. And in fact, it's an adult problem, it's not your problem. And your dad and your mother not together has nothing to do with you. Like you don't have to divorce one of your parents. They can divorce each other, but you don't have to. But your mother make it feel, and this is exactly how I felt. I was in the same situation. I felt like, oh, I have to take care of my mother. She's the victim. She had nobody. And I see exactly the same language that you were saying. That's my language. I said to myself, she had no one, and now she had to count on me. So therefore, how could I abandon her? I have to. So even though it hurt my dad, but well, he's okay. He's strong. He's good. But my mother, oh my God, I have to take care of her. Like she has no one. And so now, yeah. So the children forced to choose because of that sense of responsibility. And then you mentioned about the church. So that's the other thing, right? It's never the alienator alone. The alienator will always recruit, a community around them to destroy the alienated parents. So you said there's shaming, that and that's the thing, like, as parents, you're human. Every parent, you're human. So there are things that you could make mistake. There are things, like we're not perfect. It doesn't mean that you're supposed to lose your children because of that. This is, there are parents that don't deserve to have the children, but there are parents that make mistakes that just human mistake that has nothing to do with the fact that they still love their children.
I will say that there are some serious mental health challenges that my father still struggles with. And so I understand why, on some levels, my mother felt that she needed to protect her children from some of the negative issues, situations that can arise. Because again, we're talking about this generation, the generation that didn't deal with mental health. That was not something that they didn't go see therapists.
Yeah.
They didn't go take medication.
Right.
That was crazy talk. So I understand why she did what she did. Unfortunately, it wasn't all her choice to do, especially as I got older.
Right. Right.
The path had already been started. And so it took my choices and my free agency away.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, the decision was made for you, and it's actually not for your best benefit. What about you, Emily? What happened back then?
Ooh, there was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of abuse that was going on. My mother has borderline personality disorder that has a lot of narcissistic traits. So there was just so much abuse and chaos going on in my house when my parents were together. It was a very violent environment. And so when my parents divorced, there was allegations of sexual abuse as well, which, it just takes trump over everything else. It takes trump over the emotional abuse, the psychological trauma, the physical abuse. There was just so much going on in this situation that the moment that a sexual element was brought into that, it just all of the focus went on to my father, and my mom became this perfect victim, right? And there were 6 of us children. We were all born within a decade. 6 children in 1 decade. So it was a lot of kids. I'm the fifth youngest of the 6. So it was kind of already an established thing of chaos, right? So my dad was very easily pushed out of the picture quickly, and my mom played this role of the battered wife. Like, there's some elements of truth to that, but she is somebody that, even with other relationships, she has been physical and has been incredibly abusive herself. That this was a 2-person thing. Like, she was engaging in it. She loved that conflict. So, she kind of took this perspective. I was the one who was involved with the allegations. My other siblings weren't. There were a few different perpetrators that were named. And, it just kept that finger pointing outward from my mom. So the way that it went down is she was in 2 separate mind frames constantly of like, this has happened to her. I had PTSD from the situation. I know something happened. I know something very serious happened, but it's not clear whom. And to this day, all of my memories of my dad are memories of safeness and security and feeling unconditional acceptance. All of my memories, even when they were together and I was frightened, I was really frightened of my mom. Even though there was physical stuff coming from both parties, I never encountered that from my father. So the whole situation, what this comes back around to is my mom had this sense of like, I made things up, but then she, like, when I look at the court documents, she was making up all kinds of stuff about other children in our family also being molested by my dad. And then, so it was this constant dualism of who, either she was the victim of us children, causing the dad to be no longer in the scene. And then she was also on the thing of like, he's this horrible, evil monster. So it was always just chaos. There was constant shift of responsibility and blame. But from the get-go, it was a very easy thing for her. Everybody took her side. They were like, we know he is the problem and we just need to prove it. And if only Emily could remember what was going on, we could truly prove it. And so that's kind of how it started. He wasn't allowed any parental time with us. I ended up going into a children's home for a year because I really needed some special help. So I lived away from my family in a children's home, and a lot of the other kids were like up for adoption. There had been a lot of other situations where those children were never going to return back. It was a much bigger experience than fostering because it's a whole campus of children. But that was times where I actually got visitation with my dad, and they were great because they actually enforced it. Otherwise, with my mom, it was just no contact. We were finally allowed visitation again when I was 9 years old. My dad continued to fight for us in the background, and I just had no clue. I knew he was this kind, loving man, but he sheltered us from everything. He did not bring us into the middle of these arguments. And looking back on how, like, I only found out about parental alienation this past year, these last few months. I had no idea what was going on with him because we were being so badly abused at home that I was just like, why didn't you save me? What was wrong there? I didn't realize how much had been perpetrated against him to keep us out of his life, because he never made it our problem. He never came to us. So some of the examples, I'll give you one example. When I was maybe 7, 8 years old, it's after I came home from the children's home. He pulled up in front of the house. We were supposed to go on a visitation with him. Actually, no, I must have been older because this was after supervised visitation. So maybe like 9. And he pulled up outside of the house and he just waited there silently. And he gave my mom a phone call. He's like, hey, come on out. And she was like, well, you owe back support or something. Like, she wanted him to give her money. And we just all wept, like all of us kids. And we weren't allowed to cry, you know, like, don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about, kind of thing. So we all just, yeah, we all just hugged each other inside of one of the back rooms. She wouldn't let us go near the windows or anything to see what was going on. But just like this general sense of like us against him, and that he was the evil one and the perpetrator, and then but then also shifting the blame onto the court system. Like I had my house parents, was what they were called. They gave me jewelry and like little undergarments and stuff to make me feel like a grown woman when I was in 1st grade, and were saying to me, like, you can have these things if you go into court and you say my dad did XYZ, because they were so sure that he had done it. When they brought the dolls out, like, they bring out dolls that all have parts, right? And they were like, what happened? I would only play between the children dolls, and they would be like, well, you need to play with the adult male, right? Like, what did the adult male do? And I was like, well, so they think that I was used for child pornography because of that, but they were like, he did it. You know, everybody was so certain he did it. So it was a systemic problem. I think that a lot of fathers in particular face this, although mothers do really face alienation. But when it comes to dads being false, or anybody, I guess, being falsely accused of child abuse, it's such a malicious tool. And the courts get involved. These people who want to protect children, they start really, like, I have a lot of trauma around being coached by professionals to say things that I hadn't even said at all. My dad was always the super safe person. So that's kind of, I guess that gives a good perspective of what was going on. It was so, I didn't understand that alienation was even a thing because there was so much abuse. There was so much of the government participation in it.
So I want to break it down because there was a lot there. So to start out, your parents were both sort of volatile people. So the marriage was volatile and there was violence going on, and a bunch of kids. And then at the divorce, there was an allegation of sexual abuse to you, that, you know, and where your dad is listed as a perpetrator. And you have no memory of this. Okay, so this allegation came from your mother and you had no memories of this. So really, there's no way for you to know except the fact that now your father, and then so everybody is trying to prove that your dad did this. So they coach you, which is a very common thing. And like you said, father tend to be the victim of false allegation of sexual abuse. And then when it comes to mother being alienated, usually if the mother has a partner, that partner get claimed as a abuser of sexual abuse to the child. Usually, yeah. So usually the man tends to be. Sometimes they will be mother, but more often I think is the man get accused of sexual abuse. And so even for alienated mother, it's their partner that getting accused of that. So okay, so then and this is very common back then. If they will coach you, actually even now sometimes they will still do. They coach the children, and in the meanwhile you have no idea what was going on. You don't understand. You're a little kid, and then but it seemed like your mother herself And the system did recognize that she was not good because you were taken away and other kids were taken away. So clearly she was also coming across as an abusive, not good enough parent, right?
Yeah, at times when it first came about, what happened is I started going to my pre-K teacher over and over and over and saying that something was going on. I was doing some inappropriate behavior that they noticed that they were like, and they'd already seen all four of my older siblings. You know, we were in the same school, so they had seen all of my four older siblings. And so they knew our family and they were like, well, something's going on here. And then I started telling them stories, and I don't remember what I said. Something about PTSD is like you'll end up hyper focusing on a particular aspect, especially during sexual assault. So I remember staring at a ceiling fan. I remember when I was talking to my teachers, just staring at the little nameplate of the teacher itself. I don't remember anything that I said, but I remember a lot of the behaviors. So that came out that way. But you know, the convenient target, I feel like, was my dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sorry, I apologize. Let me just plug in my computer. I'll be 1 second. Okay, I should have done this earlier. Sorry, I forgot. I'm not at home, so everything's a little bit different set up. Okay, and I see parents. I do see question in the chat room. I think hi Paul. Paul is calling from Ireland. I see Derek asked about what advice you have for alienated parents to reconnect. I see Carrie said destroy over and over again. Rayo said, if anyone saw both parents, did anyone have a switch of feeling specifically right before returning to the alienating parent? Rayo said, if so, what did it feel like? What caused this? Octavia said, thank you all for sharing. Question, my son is being blocked to communicate using Skype. What could be a good advice when I get in contact with him? Connor said, what made you first wake up to the alienating parent was the problem? Claudia says, since you just realized what your experience with alienation, what do you think what it was before then? Okay, we're gonna try to cover as much of these as possible. And Bobby said, I have 4 children myself, and after my separation, my wife took out a bogus auto protection, and I lost visitation with my children overnight and never got any visitation time with my older children after that. I've reached out to them constantly over the past 5 years and sent gifts, but have had no contact. Okay, yeah, so Bobby's situation is just, I guess, very similar to Emily's father's situation, which is that well, the thing with Emily's situation is you don't know if this allegation was false or true because you don't have memory.
I don't know the perpetrator, right? I have some very specific things, and there's a lot to pointing toward that I was used for child pornography. There's a lot of different stuff there, but the perpetrator is who's uncertain. And I still have, it is a possibility somewhere in some reality that my dad was that perpetrator. But the second he was outside of that nasty toxicity with my mom, he changed into a totally different person, and he healed for our sake. And he just kept meticulous records. I heard that person asking about, like, you know, I've been trying to reach out to my children for 5 years. They will come to you. Even children who are adopted, they look for their birth parents. They will come to you. And if you heal personally and you keep lots of meticulous records and you just it continue to approach from a place of love, I feel like my dad possibly missed many opportunities to get us back simply because there was so much abuse happening with my mom. But at the end of the day, what really awoke me to his character, and I really had to be an adult to truly connect with this, was that he healed. I couldn't imagine him being that person, even though I know there was a lot of nastiness in that early relationship. And I don't know that person this day. So maybe there were things that happened that maybe some of it was true, or maybe he dropped me off somewhere and that I was being trafficked in that sense. But as far as all of this is concerned, he maintains this he healed himself, and then he maintained very meticulous records, and he always approached us with love, with compassion. And the man that I know today, the man that I have a really fantastic relationship with, we did lose out on him ever being able to parent me. But I have come to know and to recognize the truth, and your children will need you when they're adults. If they're going through this, just like you were saying, Monica, the enmeshing that happens with the parent, it's hard to know how to care for yourself. It's hard to know how to be a proper adult and not engage in other harmful relationships later. The more that you are taking care of yourself and preparing yourself for when your adult children are ready to be back with you, the more that you're going to have that successful relationship, even if it's not a parenting relationship with their children. Like, I think that that's so important to stress.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I guess the same with my dad. That's what he did. He kept meticulous notes, and for me as an adult to find that, then I get to truly understand what he went through, and that he truly loved me all along. It was not just when we met at the end, and then like that's just one interaction. That's not enough. But if you have been keeping record all along, that means a lot. Okay, so Lorraine is calling in from San Antonio. Thank you so much. Maria said hello. Matthew said common theme is one parent is narcissistic or borderline. Problem is the professionals can't diagnose these people properly. Yeah, because these people don't come forward to get diagnosed, right? They don't become. Okay, so let's go back to Lisa a bit. So Lisa said that when you were around 8 or something, your stepmother wrote this story that rewrite your history about your mother from the point that your mother was pregnant with you and everything. Could you tell us what was the story? Like, what was in that script? What does it say about your mother?
I was, well, the whole story is basically that I'm the evil stepchild, and my mom was evil, so I was an evil spawn. I was kicking her from the inside. This is a really sick, twisted thing that it's not my favorite thing to talk about, but just to give you the gist, she completely annihilated my mom. And when you're alienated and a parent isn't present, whether it's through court or by choice, and this is a specific age, this is why it's so important that doctors, that judges, that anybody working with professionals understand that our brains are everything. It's brand new. So everything that we put in there sticks. So when these parents get divorced and they're angry, we just wake up wait, okay, we believe it. We believe what we're told. So when you read the scripts, which is included in my book, everybody will see exactly how bad a alienator does. It's horrific. I can tell you that I kill my mom. I can tell you that she wanted me to kill myself. I can tell you all, I'm a mother. There's no way I could have written this, especially she was a mother to my siblings at the time. So when you're a mother, when you first have a baby, you're like all about babies and kids, right? No, this wasn't good. So I believed it. I stayed silent to protect my dad while I learned and just never wanted to be around my mom. I was always pushing her away. She lives 2 miles away. I can't even be around her. Even I try, but this alienation took 40 years. 40 years to uncover. And even though I was married and I raised my son, there was always something. It was like I was alienated in plain sight because all the adults around me were little kids and couldn't understand, except my dad, although he's still married to my stepmom. He has been the most supportive parent, even to this day, where when you were saying, heal, so when your kids do come back. I came back every time trying to restore a relationship with my mom. Once we figured out, holy crap, because my mom and I were always fighting, always I would just I don't want to talk to you for a year, just leave me alone. Once we found it, and my husband at the time uploaded it, and my mom said, how many triggers are we going to have? And then I sent her the script. And when she sent it, she never wavered. Then when I wrote the book, she realized she just completely disinvited me, disassociated from me. She discarded me. But you know who did it? My dad. And when this was about a week ago, and I said, Dad, I can't do this anymore. This is like 15, 16, 14, back and forth. When your parents are like that, a kid cannot be themselves. They cannot grow. Parents are supposed to raise their kids so they can grow, not keep them stunted. So my mom showing up and like, she didn't do the healing. She's refusing to do the healing, which is fine. That's on her. I got me. It's just really disgusting that some of these parents, because what happens is you're automatically hurting your child. You're re-traumatizing them. And that is not okay. So a part of me really feels that, you know, a lot of these kids, because I'm not kidding, there's times when I wish I could sue her. No kid, no parent should do this to a child. When we're little, we're growing up, we don't know, but it's when you walk into the world and you start to realize, oh yeah, like what's going on? That's my inner kid. Well, geez, my kid likes to hang out a lot with me because of course my mom, she failed. And even though she failed, she should still, I hope every parent learns from this. I really do. And I think that every kid that has ever been upset with their parents for not taking responsibility, for not, it's going to be a big wake-up call, because you can, nobody wants to, no parent, they don't want to sit there, they don't want to hear it. They even like my mom, apparently my mom is behaving like a typical targeted parent. Here's the thing, my son's 28. I raised my son. He was never alienated from me. There's no way I would treat my son the way that my mom has treated me. I came back for a year, wrote the book, kind of re-traumatized myself a little bit. Only for what? To get discarded? So to me, it makes sense that I'm like, I don't want to think that any of my parents are mentally ill, but at the same time, let's just be real. Because I talk to targeted parents all the time, they will do anything to see their kid. They hang on to every word. My mom's 2 miles away. Nothing. That's why I'm moving it. I don't know if you guys went through this, but I have environmental triggers where they don't get it. It's like my body is conditioned. It's like what goes into the mind goes into the body. And unfortunately, what happens is we don't attend to those emotions. They have to come out. So I'm talking, 5 years of intense, like over 1,600 hours of trauma therapy. Somatic. I mean, thank God I had the neurologist and I had the script, but that still doesn't negate the fact that you had a responsibility and you're still hurting me. That is not okay. If you're a parent, and I get it, we all make mistakes, but to deliberately hurt your child. So parents, if you do not heal, or if you cannot, because yes, we are emotional. We're trying to restore a relationship. But if you're a authoritative, or you have an ego, or you want to put all the blame on one person, it's not going to work. I can tell you that I probably will never see my mom again. That's a big statement. But why would I put any more time? I mean, at the end of the day, it's like I would never do that to my kid. So when what parents don't understand is that it's in our bodies. So parents have to learn that you weren't there when your child needed to know, like, it's okay, you're scared. I got you. So I basically had parents, but I didn't have parents. I just I survived, and I was angry. I was anxious, and I did have Stockholm Syndrome really bad with my stepmom, not my parents, there's like a different attachment with that. Stockholm was pretty interesting on like what the personality does and how we, like we pretend to like things even though we don't. And we're like, why did we do that? So there's so many things that go on that are missing and that don't get nurtured in. And unfortunately, that's just what happened. So the way that I look at it, I just thought I was a kid that had a bad divorce and my parents just didn't like each other. But my reactions, the way that I, because you want to be heard, I was angry because something really bad happened and was still happening. So when parents don't understand the magnitude, it's like, stay away from your kids or you're going to re-traumatize them, because it's not okay to pretend that you care and then turn around and I care. But this is the problem I also have with a lot of doctors that don't understand the mind and body. I went to over 20 years, over 5-6 different different psychologists, from forensic to regular to Christian. None of them caught it. None of them. That's a long time. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it's like, this is absolutely insanity. I mean, I know we're Gen Xers and we're used to like having like a bad childhood, but this is a human rights issue. To not be able to be comfortable in your own body while you're growing up and how that can play out. The reason I think why I did well is because that narrative was so bad and so sick. Me, not my parents, but me was like, I'm not like that. I knew something was wrong. And my parents failed. They had an obligation to protect me and they didn't. Yes. My dad has, everyone will say, well, your dad married, my dad's still here. My dad lives in San Diego. My mom's 2 miles away. Guess who shows up at least once a month, brought me dinner? My dad. My mom, nothing. That re-traumatized. That is despicable.
So your dad, though, when you were younger, when your stepmom started to share this script, your dad he was aware of it, but he didn't
know how bad. He knew, like, he did the same things like Monica and probably Emily's mom did, where like he would say things like, that's just how she is, she's just jealous. Okay, but you don't tell like a third grader that your stepmom's jealous. Like, how does that land? Like, so he wasn't perfect either, but he never stopped. My mom wasn't around. My mom was both my parents got remarried at the same time. So my dad was the more active parent, but I think my stepmom had her own issues. And I think she was intimidated by the relationship I had with my dad. And of course, when you see this attachment where, father and daughter, are super close, and she had a hard time with that. And so the only way that she could accept me is if she could destroy me. And that's what happened. Was I didn't have a safe space growing up. Once I got that typical alienated kid anger, where every parent is like, oh my God, it's like, everyone wants to think there's something wrong with you. No, that anger is keeping me alive. That anger is saying something happened. I was molested 3 times under my stepmom's care. 3 different men, one of them being her father. I know that wasn't made up. That was real. My dad, when I remembered the book, when I remembered what she wrote, I called my dad and I said, Dad, please do me a favor. I don't know if it's still there, but I need the proof. He goes, what are you talking about? Please, can you go upstairs in her nightstand? It might still be there. He brought it. 27 years. This script had laid by her bed in her nightstand. And he brought it to me. There's no way my dad knew that she wrote that. There were times when I wish I could go back. I wish I could go back and like grab it and take it to one of my aunts, somebody. But I didn't. I chose to, this is what I did. This is what kids do. So yeah, it was it was a shocker. And I can tell you that I'm glad I found it at 44 and not 14, because how we react as teenagers and as kids doesn't mean that we're going to stay that way. It just means something is going on. So for the psychologists, and this is why I called out on judges, on everyone, but they have no right saying that they know what they're talking about when they don't know how the body and brain respond. So yeah, there's a lot. There's just like so much, but I can tell you that if it wasn't for that script, I never would have known. And I've been doing this for over a year now, and I can tell you, I never would have thought, even my dad, this is how you know who was the really alienated here. Because I will say they all kind of participated in alienation. They all kind of did, right? When I told my dad, yeah, like it's been like too much, nothing, no comment from my mom. He just said, I know. He goes, you needed to find out on your own. So he wouldn't, it's like 40 years of my life, all this. So yeah, there are parents that refuse therapy. And who cares? Like, why are you afraid to go to therapy? Like, why? It's part of being human. How are we going to fix the world if we don't want to show up and go, yeah, I feel bad. I feel guilty. Let's talk about it. No, let's just shame the kids some more and make them feel worse so that we feel better. That's not going to work anymore. That's why it's like, yeah, let's get all the adult children and stand in line and like, let's go to the courts and say enough, because our kids, the way that the world is, no, we need, or we need parents or teach us how to raise ourselves when we're like 8.
So you brought up a really important point, and this is very common. Is that targeted parents, it's understandable what they have gone through. They're very traumatized. They're very broken. And I mean, yesterday I posted a question on our Facebook page, and I asked, when did you stop crying? Have you stopped crying? And you get all these comments, the parents, they're still crying, and that's understandable. It's what you're going through as targeted parents is really horrific. It's very painful. You're losing the child that you love, and you have to mourn for this child that's still alive. And in the meanwhile, you have to deal with very often false allegation, and you might get dragged through court system. You can lose everything, and then your reputation, your family and friends and everybody, and you're not able to rebuild your life and being able to be whole again. But it's so important, and that's what Emily mentioned earlier too, is it's so important for you to heal and to be whole and to live your best life, because that's the best way for you to get back to your children. Because when your children wake up to this and you are still broken, you are not going to be ready to connect with your children, and you can't wait until that point to try to recover. You can't.
You will hurt them. Yep. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I thought I was like the first month or so, I was crying. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. I had to like have extra, somatic therapy going on. I mean, thank God I have like a team of, doctors that like know my story and are compassionate and loving. And thank God for all the targeted parents supporting me. But it is very lonely. I mean, I'm not going to call my son and go, my mom hurt my feelings. That's like, I'm not going to pull that on. I rebelled. I did everything opposite only because of what I couldn't explain what was going on for me on the inside. Yeah. So parents that don't, somebody said, yeah, my story makes parents want to be better parents. And okay, great. That's good. Then I'm doing the right thing. It's just like, I don't know about you girls, but I hate being alone. So right now, like being alone is like, ooh, nobody ever really taught me how to be alone. It's like, well, how can you raise a son? How can you do all this and then feel like this?
Yeah,
because they don't get it. And so the parents that, they get so, they are traumatized. And I can tell you that if they have teenagers, when we see our parents traumatized, it automatically puts us in our fight or flight. Why? Because our parent is supposed to protect us. That's just nature. It's not the other way around. So in my case, there is a lot of family enmeshment. Plus I'm Latina. So it's like, you put that on me and it's like, oh, good Lord. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to tolerate that. It's like, that's why my nickname is Tora. I'm going to speak the truth. And hey, if you don't like it, I'm sorry, but it's not just about you, Mom, or it's not just about me. There's a ton, there's millions everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's very difficult. It's not fun to talk about. But trauma survivors, we do have funny personalities, so we get it. But I really feel bad for the parents, and especially because, it's like, God, I don't see my mom crying or posting like, I miss my child. It's like, so I get it how the targeted parents will see their kids at like a store and their kids will ignore them. And I'm like, oh my God, that's going to happen to me. But I'm the kid, not the parent. This flipped. But, at the end of the day, what legacy do you want? What kind of legacy do you want to leave for your kids? For your, you want to just ignore not going to therapy?
Yeah.
It's not right.
So in the chat, I see Bobby said, "Daddies don't just love their children every now and then. It's a love without end." Amen. Claudia said, "Thanks for sharing. You're extremely brave." Debbie said, "I heard my mother didn't want me and choose men and drugs. Then 35 years later, my daughter says to me the same thing. I recognize there was a possibility this were intergenerational." Yeah, it's very transgenerational. This is actually, the research has shown this. It's very, very, unfortunately, it's very much the situation. Debbie said, "I can't stop being mad with my family that didn't step in to help." Yeah, definitely. Debbie, it sounded like you're an adult child of parental alienation. I think we are going to interview you coming up in April, is that right? And if not, we would love to interview you. We would love to hear your story. Kathy said there's triggers for us parents too. I'm sorry your mom is too broken or you equipped to embrace you. And that's the thing. You have to heal in order to embrace your child, because when your children wake up, the trauma to your children have experienced all this trauma all of their life. But the moment that they wake up, that's when they realize the trauma. Actually, that's when it hurts so much more, because then now everything come back and you just, because all along they're just trying to survive. So it's the survival mechanism. So you just don't face the trauma, even though you been impacted all along, but you don't deal with it. But when you wake up, oh my God, all of this is, so your child, when your child wake up, the child's gonna need you the most. So you have to be fully healed and whole and be there to embrace your children, because they're gonna need you. They're gonna be so hurt and broken. And if you are still broken and hurt, then you can't save your children. And that's why I have seen stories where children come back just like Lisa, but then parents are not ready, and then that's when the relationship is truly destroyed. That's when it's truly no hope. Because if the children wake up,
the alienator. Yeah, it's like, and it's like, Mom, you were really alienated. I mean, this script is it's so bad that it frightens you, and yet why? I don't understand. And I think shame, guilt, however people want to, look, there is nothing I would not do for my son. Nothing. I would do anything. I would never hurt him, ever. I love that kid. I love him more than I love him. So when parents, I think the problem with parental alienation is that one parent always wants to blame the other, and it's like, no, it takes two. It takes two. And kid, no matter what, we have different relationships with our parents. We love them. We know what we don't like about our own parents. That's for siblings to discuss. Okay, that is for siblings to discuss. And at the end of the day, I can tell you that my brother took me out to lunch and he said, "You got to go. She's not." He said, you surpass mom. She'll never catch, she has to go to therapy. She'll never catch you. And it's like, is there jealousy? Can my mom and my step jealous? Like, are you kidding? And it's really hard. You don't want to accept that. You don't want to like, and at the end of the day, it's like, you know what, I'm too old for this. Like, I don't need my parents anymore. I raise my son, damn it. I'll raise whatever else I need to do, but I will not hide in shame or it's almost like, Petra, it almost feels like, honest to God, and I don't know if you guys feel like this, but it feels like my own mom wants me to fail. She put herself out of I think she got really scared of the book. But it feels like your parent, like the parent wants you to think this low of yourself and doesn't want you to do well. And that's there's something not right there. The ill parent.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of parents that would say things like, "Oh, my children are adult now. They have to be held accountable."
Right.
And that's really ridiculous.
Yes, that's wrong.
Right. I know.
I have boundaries. I'm like, you didn't have boundaries. If you did, you would have raised me. What? You would have put me first. Don't tell me you have boundaries now.
Yeah.
Come on.
So
right?
Parents really don't recognize that the children are the victim, and even as adults, the children, like, this is the programming that going through all of their life. Why do you think that just because they turn a certain age, like that number, there's nothing magical about that number, 18 or 20 or whatever. But that programming is a whole life. So parents say, "Oh, now that my children are adult, like they should be held accountable for their behavior." No, you need to realize there's a lot of things that need to be uncovered, and there are a lot of healing there's a lot of reconciliation that need to be made, and you can't put this on your children. You have to heal, and then you have to find a way to connect to your children through and understand the experience that they went through, so that you can connect with them and help them heal as well. So yeah, parents, this is so important.
She denied it. Yeah, she denied it. She said she wouldn't. Professional PAs, they reached out. She's like, "No, I don't need it. It's her. She's the narcissist." And I saw it thing, and I'm like, wait. My mom called me a narcissist. Like,
yeah, it's them, not me.
And all I'm thinking is, like, you never enforce the negative on your alienated kids. We grow up already with a negative bias. It takes one negative word and boom, where it's automatic. It's what the body and brain do. Doesn't mean we're narcissists. So those things, when parents do that, when they get on the sites, and they infiltrate those parental alienation sites, and you don't want to read it. Don't go. You will get like re-traumatized, because you'll hear every ugly thing, or they think you're going to be suicidal. You're going to have a horrible life. You're never going to amount to anything. And that's worries me, because if there's teenagers watching, of course, they're not going to want to come up and go, "Oh, I think I was alienated." So there's a lot of things that need to, I think, change, so that the kids are willing to think about it. Because if you're saying, it's such a, it's just so negative, and I get why, but when you're getting curious about it, it shouldn't be negative. It should be open and welcoming, not you're doomed. Like, you're doomed. So just things like that.
Can I comment on this?
Yeah, go ahead, Emily.
I noticed the same thing. So I just recently found out about parental alienation, and I have been so active in these groups because I want to understand my dad's story. The thing about this, though, I see so often that the parents are saying, "Oh, the child is a narcissist now." Yes. Narcissism and BPD come from being abused. They are a behavioral pattern that evolves over time. There's not some inherent ugliness about your child. Our brains have not formed. We are not adults. We do not have the ability of efficacy. We do not have our own autonomy even. There's nothing about us that hasn't been formed from this moment of vulnerability. If you think about an infant has to learn, when they turn 1, they learn about meeting their own needs. When they turn 4, they learn about you're a person who has similar feelings to their own feelings. If they're not being raised in this environment that nurtures that, they're going to end up in these situations where they're going to have deep, deep trauma, and you cannot hold them accountable. The person who needs to be held accountable is the abuser, and they need to be loved and cared for in a healthy new way to encourage change. And it's not going to happen overnight. It helps with it takes lots of new love and new relationships and investment. So I cannot stress that enough, because I'm not to blame. I have BPD now. I have borderline personality disorder, and it's so tough. I struggle all the time with trying to be a good mom and trying to be a good employee, and it hurts my life. It's so I'm incapacitated over it. So I hear a lot of that blaming because of the parents' hurt over being rejected. And you have to understand that the children are victims. They are not responsible. There's no way they could be, because they don't have autonomy.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. And here's the thing is, I've been through a lot of my whole life, because I wanted to find out, why would I act like that? So I would go to a counselor. I've never been diagnosed with a personality disorder, ever. And not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, I got away at 18. I was gone. I became a mom. I moved. I was a flight attendant. So I was able to get out and grow and have new experiences, but that didn't take away the pain. I just stuffed it down. What happened was, the emotions got trapped in my body, and I got really sick, to the point where it was full on adrenal fatigue. And all that is in the book. But when we do not address childhood trauma, it will pop up. But here's the good thing. Our brains it's neuroplasticity. This is how I started to heal, and I became, way more aware, and I knew about my own nervous system. Everything can be retaught. Having, emotional deregulation, that's part of not being nurtured. That's not a personality disorder. Trauma responses are not, it's not, everybody is so quick to diagnose. Even narcissism, that, they have a whole scale on it, but there's a lot of new, medical and a lot of really good, neuropsychology things that are just up and coming. I'm just saying that, the parents do get really, I guess it makes them feel better, or they think this is one thing that they do. And I'm like, please don't. Don't do that. Don't do that. They're just like their mother. They're just like their father. And it's like, we're the best parts of both of you. So I hope you think highly of both of them, because yes, I'm divorced from my husband, my son's father, but he's great. I wouldn't pick anyone else to be his dad. I don't get that. So a lot of it is like, why would you want to think so low of, I get it,
Yeah. So a lot of the things that you guys just talk about is really important, in that, and for parents to understand, is that your children only know what they know. And if they have any of these behaviors where they are rude, cold, defiant, or anything that is you're seeing, is because that's what all they know. This is their coping skills. They learn this. They're trying to survive in this environment that they were left in, and this is just, so if any problem whatsoever, you have to be the one who help your children heal. You're the good parent. You need to play that role of the good parent. You need to heal, and then you need to help your children heal. So I see Kathy in the chat room saying Stockholm Syndrome is very much the similar tactics as alienation. It definitely is, because the child will take on the objectives of the abusive person, and then attack you, the targeted parent, as if you are the enemy of themselves, even though it's actually the abuser's goal is not the child's goal, but the child will take on to that kind of behavior and attach to the abusive person. And yeah, I do understand it's kind of similar. But in this situation, it's a little bit different in that sometimes the abusive behavior is not obvious. Like in a Stockholm Syndrome, there's obvious abusive behavior, but in alienation, it's sometimes it's not that obvious, because sometimes the alienators will come across like a really good, healthy parent. So and very subtle about the way that they alienate the child. So the child may not know that, and even the society don't know that. And then Mary said, "Hi, Petra and everyone. She's from Hamilton in Canada and 17 years alienated from her 3 adult children. And she herself is an alienated child, alienated 18 years from her father. Matthew said, I would sue her." And he's talking about Lisa and her mother. "Make her an example. Please keep speaking out, because if you help one child, it's worth it." Mary said, "Sapphire, I love you." She's listing her children's name and said, "I love you, and I still cry ever since 2005 due to the false allegation." Kathy said, "Almost 28 years for me. That's a long time. And I have never blamed or directed anger or frustration at my sons. Not ever." Yeah, you're doing the right thing, Kathy. She said it's 18 years, not 28 years. Matthew said, "Best advice for when do they come back?" We'll talk about that in a minute. John said, "I'm afraid I might be like Lisa's mother. I miss my daughter dearly, but she has hurt me so deeply. How could I ever trust her again? My heart wants her back, but my mind wants to protect my heart." And yeah, and I understand that. I understand you're hurt and you're broken. And it's scary to open up to your child because you could be attacked again. But you're the parent. You're the parent, and the parent's role is always a parent. It doesn't matter how old your children are. And obviously it's your choice, because if you choose not to open up, then obviously you won't have that relationship with your child, and your child would have you as a father. But I hope that you figure out how to open up and reconnect with your child and help her heal. Okay, Frederick.
Petra, there was that question that someone asked earlier. I'm sorry, there was that. It's kind of important. They asked if there was this change in what did they say?
Between the alienated parents and alienated.
Yeah, like going from one to the other. I don't know. Is that something you have time? There's time for it.
Do you want to address that?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's real basic. Like, I mean, there was most definitely. It's like because it was 2 separate family cultures, right? So, when I was with my dad, I was able to act one way and feel, well, I never really knew what was okay to say and not say as time went on. And I think that silenced me more. And so there's definitely, I learned, whoever asked the question, as a kid, I learned that there were certain things to not say with one parent and other things that I could say, if that makes sense. Like there was a separate set of rules, at each place. And so, yeah, there's like this transition. I mean, even now with my own daughter, because I'm divorced again, this is the ripple effect, the generational curse, right? From, my kids are like 4th generation of parental alienation. It's ridiculous. So, I have to give my daughter like at least a day, I just let her be, right?
Yeah.
I let her be and get acclimated, because it's a physical thing. It's a mental, emotional thing.
Yeah, you feel it in your body.
Yep. She's only 6 and I can already see her, like when he comes and like, do I hug him? He's leaving. Do I come to mom? I already see her having to deal with that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I went through the same thing.
What happened? And what happens? So in those moments, anytime a child has to worry or wonder, what do I do with my parent? What's happening? They're offline for themselves. So we are literally living our lives to appease the adults that can't seem to get it together. And when you have one good parent and one parent that is acting out of vengeance or revenge, that is lethal. Because now you're talking about your child's human right, because their minds and bodies are growing rapidly at this stage. The first 3 years are important. The first 13 years are really important. So the first 7 years, thank God, I guess we're, okay, but holy hell, this is not okay.
Right.
And thank God I'm seeing other two women here like, okay, so you understand it. Yeah, okay, good.
We're finally not alone.
Because, yeah, we're not alone. Good. Because, I think, because I was a divorced kid and my son's father was a divorced kid, we automatically knew we're not going to pull this shit. We're not. And we didn't, thank God. And so when I hear parents, like, they complain about 50-50, we want 50-50. I'm like, hey, you guys know that 50-50 to vote. Your kids still need their own time. You have to being a parent is a gift, and it should never be for any parent to purposely want to hurt a child.
Yeah, so I call this the switch. So for parents that experience this, that where you still have some access to your children, and then you have the children go over to your house, and this is usually sort of a mild to moderate level of alienation. So the child is not fully alienated yet. You still have access to your children, but you notice at the transition time that your child, like when you pick up the children or when the children are about to go to the other house, the children suddenly kind of act differently. They call and they kind of, suddenly distance and all that. I call this the freestyle period for children of alienation, because they need time to kind of thaw out, and then they start to freeze up to get ready to go. And you need to understand that dynamic and be able to give your children time and space, and also to plan it out so that you have a chance to say goodbye to your children before they go over there, so that before they turn cold, you really have, this, so you have to anticipate it. So, and the same with what Lisa was saying, is I think Monica was saying, when your children come over, give them some space and time so that they can thaw out. And yeah, definitely. And then the other thing is really important, is to make yourself the safe space so that your children can say anything, because Monica said, she learned to go, well, I apologize for the background noise. I think there's some construction going on around here, but the children learn and they feel this sense of, I can't talk about certain thing over here, so I have to behave. So, and you might think that you're setting rules, but really what you are doing is you're not allowing your children to be fully themselves, and then they are not being able to speak up, and then you are not going to be able to help your children if there's any problem. So my children, I really try my best to encourage them to speak. And so there are situations where I would talk to my ex, and he has no idea about, their boyfriends, and he doesn't even, he think that they're just friends, right? But my daughters are comfortable to come and tell me things that are going on, and then I talk to my ex, he has no idea. And that's the thing, you think that you set up rule, and he's very much against the idea that he think that my children are too young to have boyfriends. But well, whether you want it or not, it's going to happen. So do you want it to happen where you know about it so you can participate in helping your children? Because they will come to you if you let them speak, and be the safe space so that they can come to you. Because if you block them in some way, all you're doing is you're not stopping your children from being who they are. All you're doing is you're blocking yourself from seeing that whole picture about your children. And that's so important.
And you can either use that as a way to get closer to them, or you're going to use that to push them away even further. And if you can't talk to your own parent, you're going to talk to someone else. So it's really important, especially nowadays with the internet and everything. They can find out on their own. Be approachable. And if you don't know what that looks like, watch a movie, go look at a parent that you like, and embody those strengths for a bit, and see how that feels. Because I can tell you, I was thank God I was young when I was a mom. Thank God I was young and was in my 20s, because I was really, I guess, I was really, I think for the first time I felt like, oh, okay, my life just started, because I didn't want to remember. I would just say, I was just a kid from a divorce and I had a bad stepmom. I don't want to talk about it. And no, there was more.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's so important for you to see things, and when you interact with your children and things that you do for your children, you do it from their perspective. It's just because you think, oh, okay, it's the same thing with, like when you give somebody a gift, you don't give them a gift that you like. You give them a gift that you think they like. And that's the same thing with your love for your children and your relationship.
It's unconditional. It's unconditional. And that's the thing that I don't know if maybe these parents are ill if they can't offer that unconditional, because if you don't love yourself, how are you going to love your kid?
Right.
You're going to be triggered all the time. You're just going to be mad. And
right. So I saw Frederick said in the chat room that thank you so much for sharing these heartbreaking stories. You are so important. And I agree with Frederick so much about that. He said, you are important because you are so much more credible than us, the alienated parents. When I argue, people think that, that guy must have done something really bad, and no kids would reject a parent for no reason. It's so counterintuitive, the whole phenomenon. And yes, and I totally agree. And this is actually why I do these events, because we, as a movement, we need the adult children to speak up, because parents have unfortunately a lot less credibility, because people will immediately, society has this way of blaming the victims. So when parents speak up, the first thing they think is, oh, even your children don't love you, so you must have done something wrong.
Right.
And then throw in there, false allegation of abuse. Now it's all mixed up and all confusing, and so it's very hard for people to listen to alienated parents and trust their stories. So it's so important for us as adult children to speak up, because this is our true experience. You can't deny what happened to us. At the same time, we have no motive here. We're not fighting for custody. We're not trying to raise or lower child support payment. We're not trying to get even with our exes. Right. None of those things. We have no motive. This is just what happened to us, the trauma that we experienced, and we are the victims. We want the world to recognize what happened to us. That's why I totally agree with Frederick, and I'm so grateful for you guys to be here. I'm gonna ask maybe one or two more questions. I apologize. I wanted to run a lot longer, but today I do have to go because we have the Children First campaign. That today we have a rehearsal for Los Angeles. For people that are not familiar with it, we have a campaign coming up. It's called Children First, where we're going to have a flash mob in as many cities around the world as possible. Right now we have 26 cities, or 27, I forgot. 26 or 27 cities around the world. So people that don't know flash mob is a group of people that assemble and do a very quick performance, surprise, unannounced performance in a crowded place. So we have a particular dance and a particular designated song. It's very fun. We wanted to have the message to be positive, upbeat, and we hope that it will be more sort of like give a chance for social media sharing, and hopefully our message gets spread, because I don't want it to be protests and things like that always have this stigma of negativity and drama and things like that. I want to kind of try something different. So this is a way of raising public awareness in a more sort of positive way. So anyway, today we have rehearsal coming right up. But what I do want to ask is, could we have another session with 3 of you guys? Because I really barely touched the surface. I have so many more questions. Would that be okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
I'm into it.
Okay, thank you. So we'll set another time and we'll come back, because I really have so many more questions, and we hardly cover. And there's all these questions that I read in the chat room that we haven't even addressed at all. But I know that so Lisa talked about the trauma, what it has done to her. Emily talked a little bit about how she's experiencing and she's struggling and trying to be a good mom and a good employee, and it's challenging. Monica, could you talk a little bit about your experience, what it has done to you?
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I am. I'm sorry, it's a very emotional thing to, and shocking and traumatizing thing to look back on your life and realize you didn't know who you were. You didn't even have the opportunity and the chances to really have the stability. And there have been so many times where I've been homeless. I had nowhere to go, no one to help me, no one to support me. It resulted in an early marriage. I was homeless, I had nowhere to go, and there was somebody stable. And so there I was, 18, getting married right away. And I had no connection to myself. Thankfully, I had dance as a way to process some of the trauma. But it's not, you know, it's not going to take care of all of it. It's just one tool. So then years later, I end up divorced. And then I became the alienated parent in that toxic relationship, and now divorced again because I simply didn't know who I was.
And that's the thing, because you were never allowed to be yourself. You had to shape yourself around all this toxic environment and abusive people,
Yes.
and you step toeing and you're just trying to survive. And this is very common, is that alienated children, because they're never given a chance to grow up in a healthy
Yes.
environment. Yeah, you don't know what love should look like. You don't know what good relationships should look like. You don't know how to set boundaries.
And Petra, I didn't go through some of the traumas that Lisa and Emily went through, which just adds more. It adds more on top of that not knowing. And, you know, so it just, you know, obviously I'm thankful for certain things that I did not have to go through. At the same time, you know, we all have those injuries and those scars that stayed with us our entire lives throughout all of our relationships, and trying to form friendships, and then trying to just finding a job, just getting along with coworkers, with figuring all those different dynamics out. And as you grow up, people treat you like there's something wrong with you.
Monica.
Wrong with you.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong
Oh,
with
I'm
you.
so sorry.
I
agree
there's
with this,
nothing
Monica,
wrong with you.
because
There's nothing wrong with you guys. You guys survived. You did what you were supposed to do. Your body and brain did exactly what it was supposed to do. The problem is it was the parents, and it was the way that family courts are run. There's nothing wrong with you. It's pain, and it passes, and there's ways to treat it, and we heal. It's just a long healing journey. It's better.
Monica, something that has always been a real truth for me is that, you know, if you get a beating, right, and it's like really abusive, it's so obvious. And then, like, you know, you can recognize it. Truly what the pain is and what the hurt is, though, is the psychological drama. And the more covert it is, the more hurtful it is, because it's so hard to find. Like, I'm hearing some things from you that sounds very similar to that codependence, the reversal of the roles between parent and child with your mom. And you know, it's so hard to understand that. And because it's so subtle, there were things that I knew for sure, but it wasn't until I held my baby in my arms for the first time that I was like, I would never do that to my baby. So it still is stuff that I'm unraveling, because we all have a responsibility to ourselves to find out who we are and to heal. So Monica, I really, really connect with that. And I want to give you a lot of validation, because I feel like that is truly what the trauma is. That's truly what the long lasting marks are, is the subtlety and not even knowing our own selves, our own body. Lisa was mentioning the somatic stuff. It hurts our bodies. We end up with chronic health issues. So I really want to give a lot of awareness to that the obvious stuff is obvious. The things that are more covert and subtle are really the things that make the lasting trauma.
Right, I totally agree. That's the thing. Yeah, when it's a physical abuse where you can actually see the beating and all that, then the world can recognize that. They can see bruises, but when it's psychological abuse, they don't see that, and then they totally underestimate the trauma.
You're dismissed and gaslighted and told, oh no, you look great, and it's like
stop being so dramatic.
Oh gosh, yeah. I didn't even know. I was like, the whole script was all gaslit. It was so bad, I didn't even know. And then a friend told me, like, you're no, I'm not. Yes, you are. And I'm like, oh my god. So there's always, it's like you live life backwards to live it forwards. And you know, at the end of the day, it's just it sucks. I get that validation. I'll never forget. What does help is a nice stable, you know, marriage, and I did have that, thank God. But then when that went away, guess what popped out? Oh, my little kid in every age that I had been traumatized. And so, you know, you feel like, don't be ashamed of it. It's like, this is what happens, and I'm just gonna love myself through it. If it makes you uncomfortable, mom or aunt or whoever, that's okay, because it's gonna help someone that's watching, and that's what I care about. I care about the kids and the you know, adults that, like, hey, look, it's okay. I get why people numb themselves, because this stuff, when you're alone and you're feeling it, you're like, either panic attack, or I can see why people would reach for the bottle, why they would you know, if I did not have that script, if I didn't read every single thing that was not meant for my brain or my soul, oh my God. So especially as a kid, when you try to talk to your parents and you don't have that proof, I don't know where I would be if I didn't have this, honest to God. If I didn't have the proof to say, here it is, right here, 40 years later, this is what I've been talking about. Yeah. I don't know if I ever would have gotten closure, or if I would have been able to, like, people would have looked at me and said, we're so sorry. I've been screaming for 40 years. No child should scream for 40 years. No kid should be going to a doctor, you know, therapist after therapist, and not know. One forensic guy got really close to figuring it out, but it's not in the DSM over here. So I get it. Those are very normal feelings for us alienated kids that get it. It's uncomfortable, and then our parents didn't teach us, like, how to deal with that. So yeah, it's a totally normal response. And
no, I understand. And it was so interesting what Monica said about not knowing herself. So for me, my alienator is my mother, and by the time I realized it, which is just 2 years ago, you know, and by that time my dad had passed, so I have no father left. I never had that relationship with my father. When I confronted my mother, she then turned around and attacked me, and it took 2 years. So really the last 2 years, she just attacked me, and then finally, a few months ago, she finally left. Now, so in the last few months, the trauma I finally had to face, and you know, by all measure, people from outside looking at me saying, oh, you're great, you're fine, you know, like, you look not broken. But really, my God, the last few months, the trauma to try to have to face finally, because all along and all my life, I realized that I lived my life for my mother. So then suddenly I had to go, oh, who am I? And it really, just like what Monica was saying, I had no idea who I am. And the last few months, I started to try to figure out, oh, this is what I like. And it's so basic thing to try to heal yourself. I'm like, oh, this is how I like my eggs. This is how I like my... It's so, seriously. And I have to be so gentle with myself. I'm like, it's okay. I'm just figure it out now. Like, all along, it's a message in my head. And I'm going, it turned out, no, I didn't like it's this way at all. It's this way. It's, you know, I kind of figure out myself. It's so crazy. So I totally relate to you. I do have to go right now, but I'm so grateful for you guys, and we have such a great conversation here. And I hope the parents find it useful. But please, let's reschedule this because I have so many more questions for you guys about how you wake up to this. How did you wake up, and how do you feel, and what would work and what doesn't work, and all that. So I really hope that we can reschedule very soon for all of you guys to come back and let's dig deeper. And I do apologize. I have to go for this rehearsal. Parents, please post your question because I'm going to hopefully use those questions for the next session when we come back. So please post your questions and please help us by sharing this. If you don't want to share it on your personal Facebook, share it in other groups that you are in, or like this and whatever to help us spread the message. And please subscribe to our mailing list. It's on our website, victimtohero.com. And we'll figure out a date that will for everyone, and we'll come back and we'll dig in further, and I'll make sure that I don't have to reschedule after. But thank you so much for being here, everyone. Really appreciate you guys. You guys are really brave for being here and be willing to be vulnerable. It takes a lot, and what you have gone through is just crazy. So you really should be so proud of yourself. I'm so grateful for all of you. I see a lot of chat room. Catherine said, "Well, that's heartbreaking." Catherine said, "Thank you." I see Lauren said, I see a lot of messages. So parents, please post your question, post your comment, and then I also gonna share the link with these ladies here, the link to this video, so that they can see your questions. So that if there's any question that they can help you answering, in the meanwhile, they will go in and answer your question. So please post your question and comment. And yeah, once again, thank you so much and have a great day.
Okay.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Okay, so I stop the live streaming. Thank you so much, and then I'll contact you